Jerry. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, no, I had really a question on 9C. This struck me as pretty unusual to see, and left me feeling a little bit uncomfortable, especially, seeing, a board member who is being hired to run interference with local governments, and we're going to likely discuss some of these, and we already have, and this is kind of the first time I'm learning of what the relationship with Atkins is. And looking back a couple months ago when we had a conversation about the MCORS project, and Commissioner Desloge advocated, not to make a decision right away, and I'm just wondering where we're going to draw the line. How do we know? Is it only going to be on the vote? Is it going to be advocating for decisions, or trying to sway the conversation? And Mr. Attorney, you may be able to weigh in more on what's appropriate, but it just really left me feeling wholly uncomfortable not knowing that ahead of time.
Commissioner, when Commissioner Desloge and I discussed it, an issue came up about how he should recuse himself. What I've recommended right now and what he's agreed to now is that if the issue comes up before, and let me back up for a second, make sure the foundation is in place. Presently, there is no alignment that impacts the CRTPA. So the CRTPA does not have a formal policy role to make as it relates to the MCOR alignment. But the legislation stated that each MPO, which the CRTPA is, would select a person to be a representative on the MCOR in their quarter. So Kristen Dozier, as a commissioner, is our representative on the MCORs. Now, one of the things that has not come up is there has not been any formal decision making done by the CRTPA as it relates to the MCORs. There's been some discussion, but what I've recommended to Commissioner Desloge is that if any issues come up in the future, he should announce the conflict. And he's asked me, and Greg Slay and I've looked at the secondary issue, which is once he announces a conflict, he should discuss the item. My preliminary position on that is that he should not discuss the item. Greg wants me to look at that a little bit closer, and I'm looking at that. But right now, Commissioner Desloge is in agreement with that recommendation. So if an issue comes up before the CRTPA, as it presently stands, each time it comes up involving the MCORs, he will announce that he has a conflict and he will not discuss the item. In my opinion, what I stated was that we should revisit this issue if there's actually any policy decision making that would occur with the CRTPA as it relates to the MCORs. So right now you have a bright line between the MCOR alignment selection and the CRTPA's role. In other words, there's no actual policy considerations being generated by the CRTPA.
Okay. So, and in his role in that position, is he able to lobby CRTPA board members, or should he just refrain from that completely?
It's implicit that the board members, the commissioners that he would lobby is where the alignment was. So I did not address that issue, but I would, if I had to opine, I would say he would not lobby county commissioners, city commissioners, or anyone that was on the CRTPA board. But that issue is not before you because there's no alignment that affects the Leon County area. So I didn't actually address that issue because it wasn't the one that was actually, that should generate a question.
I understand. And okay. Greg, I think we may have talked about it, Slay, last year maybe, about just a registration for lobbyists for CRTPA. Currently, at the city and the county you can register, but there's not really a process to submit a registration to lobby CRTPA. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And by and large, I think when we talked last year, we rarely, if ever, get any lobbying contacts. But again, if that's something that you want to put on a future agenda, yeah, we could put something up and have the board make that discussion, but that would need to be policy direction from the board.
Sure. Yeah, and that's something I would support just for full transparency, so it could be public record anytime somebody does intend to lobby the board. Thank you.
Point.
Sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying, I have a quick question of understanding here for a second. has the issue come up with this? Because we all serve on different boards. I'm pretty sure that Commissioner Desloge has had a conversation with the attorney about his potential conflicts. I think we all know how to handle conflicts. I'm wondering if I missed something and that there's been an issue that has happened. Did I miss anything there, Thornton or Greg?
No, you didn't. This is done in an abundance of caution. If you recall, there was a meeting where Commissioner Desloge disclosed that he was possibly going to work for or was working for Atkins, and he wanted to make sure there was no conflict. He laid out for us what I put in the memo, which he provided to me. I restated that in the opinion, and it's what I stated earlier. He reached out to me and wanted to make sure that my opinion was still valid. I told him that I felt more comfortable giving him a written document that would outline how I saw the issues. And so that's how this came about. This is more of an abundance of caution because, as you all know, I'm going to call it like I see it. And so when he and I discussed it, I explained to him that this is what I thought the law was in this issue. There's a bright line between the alignment for the MCORs and the role of the CRTPA. And so I outlined that for you. But this is Commissioner Desloge wanted to make sure that it was clear that there was no conflict. So there was no issue that came up, to answer your question.
Thank you, Gordon. We've always allowed our individual commissioners to handle their conflicts by themselves. I've never been a part of a conversation where we've asked the attorney about a specific commissioner's conflict. So I thought maybe I had missed something, but it's good to know that Commissioner Desloge has reached out to you with what potential conflicts and handled it that way. This was different to me, and I just wanted to make sure that again that I didn't miss anything, because this is just different than what we've handled things in the past, where when we've had conflicts, commissioners have stated their conflicts or talked to the attorney prior to the meeting, or the attorney has said whether or not the conflict was there, and we went forward. So I just want to make sure that I didn't miss anything. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Thornton, for answering my question.
And just let me follow up. It is different, but Commissioner, because of the high profile of this project, MCORS, I think it was the better approach. Commissioner Desloge reached out to me and wanted to get my opinion on it. So I thought it was appropriate to go ahead and document that to make sure it was clear there was no conflict.
Mr. Chair, can I weigh in on this real quick?
Sure.
Just to clarify, before I ever entered into any kind of relationship, I talked to not only Thornton, but I also talked to Herb at the county and said, I want to be abundantly clear. And in both cases, they said no, for all the reasons Thornton just gave. So I just circled back and said, can I memorialize that so that I make sure if I'm not here to speak for myself and everybody goes, well, or Thornton's not here or Herb is out the door. So this for me was kind of a formality after the fact, but this was done well in advance of me ever even considering this. So.
Okay. Anybody else? Kristen?
Mr. Chair, yeah. So I appreciate, and Commissioner Desloge, you have disclosed this not just at CRTPA, but also at the County Commission meeting, I think perhaps before you were, or at sometime around when you were joining CRTPA. I'll put it that way. I don't know when, but I was made aware of this a couple times. So sure, it is typical that we identify our own conflicts if an issue comes up. Thornton, I really do appreciate you memorializing this, whether you added the memo to the agenda or had it just for your own information. And Mr. Desloge, you asked for this. I think that is a good idea, particularly in something that's high profile. I'm going to say that I actually came to this a little late. Greg mentioned that for the county who download a PDF versus going through board docs, we actually downloaded the PDF before this item was added, and because there wasn't a notice just kind of missed it until today. And I was notified that there was a change in the agenda. So I really appreciate you saying that, Greg. It happens here, it happens Blueprint, it happens other places, so that's not extraordinary. But I think that is just a good reminder to us. So, Thornton, I may have had the opportunity to ask you a couple questions before the meeting, and instead I'm going to ask them here, and that is,
Kristen, I'm sorry. Before we get to the questions, I told Greg previously I have a meeting, I have to leave. So I'll let y'all work this out on your own. So we'll see you next meeting.
thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Matlow, that makes you chair now, so we can pass the gavel to you.
Absolutely. Commissioner Dozier.
Thank you. All right, so Mr. Williams, the way you described Leon County or CRTPA in the memo about MCORs, because this is now on the record, I'm asking this question just to make sure we've got the right perspective on this. And something you said in response to Commissioner Maddox's question, that there is a bright line between the role of MCORs and CRTPA, that resonates with me. In fact, I will be on my last task force meeting tomorrow, having done amendments for MCORs last week, and I've served for over a year. So there is a bright line between the role of the task force and what CRTPA, our role is in appointing one member to the task force. However, your perspective deals with sunshine rules within CRTPA and ethics rules within CRTPA, right? And with that, I'm not sure it matters whether or not Leon County is part of the corridor. It matters that Jefferson County is part of the corridor, and that is part of our MPO. I'm also not sure, and maybe Greg Slay could speak to this, but I thought only MPOs that were touched by the corridor assigned people to the task force. We don't have the MPO from West Florida, for example. So I wouldn't necessarily have been asking any of these questions had the memo not been on the agenda. And so I don't want to, get too far in the weeds, but now that it's there, I think we need to be clear about what we're looking at here. So could you, if that makes sense, could you speak to the MPO issue or CRTPA versus just Leon?
It does, and we can make it even more narrow. The issue really is, are the policy, any decisions that you're making as a task force member, are they policy decisions of the CRTPA? And my memory is that they're not. You're actively in that role as a task member. So the CRTPA is not expressing any policy considerations as you sit on that task on the task board for the MCORs. So that's the bright line for me. So you're correct, Jefferson County's there, but that's not even relevant. The relevant issue is, are you getting direction from the CRTPA on how you're making the decision? And the bright line, as I understand, is that you're not. And so what we discussed was that if you were to come back to the CRTPA, and you are correct that my legal opinion goes to the CRTPA, that then Commissioner Desloge would have to disclose that he had a conflict, and he accepted my recommendation that he would not discuss the item because he expressed a conflict. And so that's the bright line. You're on that task force, but you're not coming back to the CRTPA for guidance on how to make your policy decisions, as I recall.
You are right about that. I just want to be really clear that it's not because Leon isn't part of the corridor.
Correct.
The corridor could change. Things could happen in the future. This is guiding principles. It is because CRTPA has a member county.
Correct.
And Greg Slay, was I right? Only MPOs that are touched by this corridor are included on the task force, and we don't have someone from West Florida. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. The only MPOs that are included were ones that had, some portion of their planning area within the study area of the Suncoast Parkway.
And we could have appointed our Jefferson County member, but Commissioner Barfield was already a member of the task force, so it fell to me. So and we do have a ad hoc member, Chris Rito, who is also on the task force. So I just want to make sure that our language in describing this is correct. And then I guess the other two quick things I'll say, Mr. Chair, as you were the one who raised some questions about this, I'll toss it back over to you. One, I really do appreciate Commissioner Desloge, you accepting Mr. Williams' recommendation not to discuss things if you have to state that conflict in the future. That's Leon County policy. My understanding is it might not be CRTPA policy. I welcome the opportunity to look into that a little further, but I'm glad that we've already got that up front. And the last thing is, I do believe strongly there's going to be a push for legislative action on the MCOR's bill going forward after and I will say it openly, that is my hope. That's what you would hear from me tomorrow if you listen to the meeting. Greg Slay and I had a meeting with a number of people from Atkins and FDOT a week ago Friday, and I've actually added an amendment to encourage changing that legislation. And it's really focused on the 5-year work plan for FDOT and kind of separating MCORs from that work plan, so we make sure that we don't harm any projects for our MPO or anyone else around the state. A lot of other issues packed into that, but that's the most germane to what we've been working on. I would suggest that our MPO, CRTPA, may want to look at this issue at our next meeting if there is legislation introduced and take a stand on that. So again, only because the memo was on the agenda, do I have, I feel like I should bring this up. I would have waited until after the final report was submitted. But this is kind of a heads up that I would like to see this come back for discussion of CRTPA in the near future. So that's where I am. Thank you. Thank you all for looking at this issue.
Thank you, Commissioner Desloge. Any other comments on this issue? Okay. That would bring us to, are there any items from CRTPA board members to discuss?
Real quick, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Minor?
Thank you. Just wanted to say there's some really exciting projects on today's agenda. So kudos to the CRTPA staff, Greg, and everybody else, as well as Kimley Horn. Thank you very much.
Any other comments before we adjourn?
Mr. Chair, I apologize. We skipped right over that Highway 90 bike trail and without questions, because it's such a great project, I would hope. But I want to give a shout out to Commissioner Barfield. I know she has been working on this project and others very hard. I had a briefing with Greg and other staff a few months ago in Kimley Horn, and we're just making great progress, and the Sun Trails is a critical piece here. So I'm really excited about that project. I really appreciate Commissioner Barfield's work. Thanks.
Any other comments? We are adjourned.
Thank you all for coming today.
Okay.